At this moment, America stands as the richest, freest, most powerful, most successful nation in the history of the world. Now, as we have learned to our sorrow, we are also vulnerable, wounded, and at war. Let me tell you about a secret meeting convened somewhere near Washington, D.C., a meeting that brought together some of the most respected men and women in and out of government. These analysts and academics, operatives and leaders, were asked to play a game. Not just any game, but a very serious game. A game that fed the theories and conviction of the players into supercomputers and spat out scenarios and results, which the players tried to change and control. The object of the game was to determine what constituted the greatest threat to America's success and survival, and then defeat that threat. These players knew all about threats. In different ways, each had worked on behalf of cause and country for many years, and knew how to face the enemy and win. But today was different, for despite all that these wise men and women knew, the game did not turn out as expected. Hour after hour it continued, and the scenarios and results became darker and more dangerous. And even after 10 hours of intense effort, nothing they could offer, no political ploy, no military thrust, no ideological or economic or covert gambit could alter the terrifying outcome. The result was so shocking and depressing that at the end of the game, the players were asked to never speak of the day to anyone, to keep the horrific story secret from the public, a story to which the wise men and women could offer no hope, no salvation. And, upset and shaken, they haven't, not publicly, because, after all, what would they say? And here is what they discovered. The greatest threat to America and the West did not come from China, the emerging superpower, nor from Russia, the old superpower. It did not come from any single government or state, but from an idea, from a theology. It came from Islamic fundamentalism and the spread of jihad, or holy war, throughout Asia, Europe, and even North America. This cataclysmic defeat did not require all Muslims to join this battle, for surely most Muslims do not subscribe to this malevolent theology. Nevertheless, a significant minority, numbering many millions in numerous countries, do believe in the fundamentalist worldview. Enough for the endgame to play out first with the collapse of American will, and then with the disintegration of the American way of life, spelling the end of America itself. And all within our lifetimes. That secret meeting was held in September 2000, exactly 1 year before the attacks in New York and Washington caused so much death and destruction. Now we are all well aware that the war game is no longer just a game, but harsh reality, and a reality that we must face, an enemy that we must fight, a war that we must win. The war will be fought in many different ways on many different battlefields, including, as we have already learned, on the home front. Stephen Emerson is one of the world's leading investigators and journalists covering terrorism, and the award-winning film you're about to see is the result of his many years of pioneering work. It shows, in startling, frightening detail, how a network of terror has quietly and persistently worked its way into the heart of many American communities, where its agents raise money and train and plot and plan to wreak havoc at home and abroad. Released in 1995, it raised the first alarms that here in the U.S. we were tolerating the growth of an evil that could eventually rise to strike and destroy us from within. You will be both astonished and horrified by undercover footage of terrorists working behind closed doors in your backyard. Sometimes the camera will be shaky or the picture's a little hard to make out. Look past that. This is not a Hollywood movie using stunt people and special effects. This is real, and real people risk their lives to take these pictures and bring them to you, so that you would know the truth. Groundbreaking when originally released, Jihad in America has been proved nothing less than prescient by subsequent events. Its message is more important than ever because the threat is more pressing, more vicious, more horrifically present than ever.
حتى التحرير أو الشهادة حتى التحرير أو الشهادة مع الديان خلف العدنان نهج القرآن درع الإخوان ضد الخوان.
We're on top of the roof, out in the open. The snow falling, cold, you're very cold.
Watch out, watch out.
Walking by the elevator, I could hear people yelling for help. The smoke was getting thicker, and I knew it was time for me to leave. And I was very, very frustrated and saddened that I had to leave these people. I didn't know what was going to happen to them.
People were breaking windows.
I just remember not being able to breathe.
Smoke was just gushing out on the top of the roof. I was scared. I was terrified.
There's been an explosion deep below the 110-story towers of the World Trade Center in New York City.
You suddenly realize that for a split second, you would be dead. That, you know, you just can't comprehend it, that you would have been dead. I mean, it would have all been over.
For those who survived the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, the trauma lingers on. But for the rest of us, it was a spectacular news event that has come and gone. But has it really? The answer appears to be no. I've reported on international terrorism for the past 10 years. And since the World Trade Center bombing, I've been investigating the networks of Islamic extremists committed to jihad in America. For these militants, jihad is a holy war, an armed struggle to defeat non-believers or infidels, and their ultimate goal is to establish an Islamic empire. Most Americans understand little about Islam, and it is very important to point out that the overwhelming majority of Muslims are not members of militant groups. During the next hour, you will hear what these militants say among themselves and witness some of their secret activities here on American soil. The trail began 15 years ago with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Hoping to halt the spread of communism, the United States actively backed the Mujahideen, Afghanistan's Islamic rebels dedicated to spreading jihad. The CIA channeled almost $3 billion to the Mujahideen through the intelligence service of neighboring Pakistan. Charles Kogan helped run the operation for the CIA.
As far as the U.S. side of it was concerned, this was an agency operation. The training was carried out by the Inter-Services Intelligence Directorate at camps along the border, and in the interior of Pakistan, too. I would say that over the sweep of the Cold War, this was the most successful covert action that the U.S. engaged in. This was a very remarkable event. The Soviet Union had invaded a country which was not within their orbit, and they were forced to withdraw from it. And this was a clear reversal of communism.
Meanwhile, in nearby Iran, the revolution led by Ayatollah Khomeini was underway and fanned the flames of the anti-Western sentiment that had been growing in much of the Middle East. In 1981, Islamic militants assassinated Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, America's closest Arab ally. The assassination gave the radicals confidence they could strike their enemies at will. It was in this environment that Sheikh Abdullah Azzam rose to prominence. Born in Palestine, Azzam fought against Israel and against Arab regimes he believed were puppets of the West. In the early 1980s, Azzam went to Peshawar, Pakistan, to set up a support network for the Holy Warriors. The American headquarters was called the Al-Kifah Refugee Center, but when translated, the Arabic on their own letterhead reads, the Office of Services to the Holy Warriors. It provided money, weapons, and most important, recruited thousands of Muslim fighters from outside Afghanistan. Azzam helped transform the war against the Soviets into a full-blown international jihad, or holy war. Now, the enemy was no longer just the communists, but Jews, Christians, and moderate Muslims, who they accused of being part of a conspiracy to defeat Islam.
The world today is arbitrarily ruled by Jews and Christians. The Americans, the British, and others. And behind them, the fingers of international Jewry with their wealth and their women and their media.
At the same time, Pakistan was funneling more and more of the CIA's money to the most radical Afghan Muslims. In the end, they would contribute to the expansion of jihad around the world.
We sought to maintain a balance and never allow it to get too far in favor of the fundamentalists. We had really very few illusions. That's not to say that we could have predicted that some of these mujahideen might have turned against the U.S. or the West later on. But as I say, our focus was on hitting and hurting as much as possible the Soviet forces in Afghanistan. I don't think we have really anything to be apologetic about. These were the fighting assets, and we had to aid them. What came later, came later.
The Mujahideen had succeeded in driving out a superpower. It showed men like Abdullah Azzam that they could now defeat any enemy of Allah, no matter how powerful.
Oh brothers, after Afghanistan, nothing in the world is impossible for us anymore. There are no superpowers or mini powers. What matters is the willpower that springs from our religious belief.
Jihad battlefronts expanded throughout the Middle East. Islamic holy warriors began launching terror attacks against Israel, Egypt, and Algeria.
The terrorists portrayed themselves as freedom fighters, and many in the West fell for this. They thought, well, they're just freedom fighters. We're for freedom, and we're for fighting for freedom, and why not just accept them for what they are, whereas they were in fact terrorists. So it's not a new problem that terrorists will hide behind definitions.
Paul Bremer was ambassador at large for counterterrorism for the State Department in the 1980s.
I always felt when I was involved in the counterterrorism efforts that it was important to make a distinction. We were not anti-Islamic. The vast majority of Islamic people, the vast majority of Arab people are peace-loving, peacekeeping people like most Americans. Terrorists in every society are a very small minority of corrupt, criminal, violent people, many with a political agenda, who should be singled out for specific attention. But it should never be that we say in anything that gives the impression that we think the fight against terrorism is a fight against Islam or a fight against the Arabs.
Ironically, anti-Western militants soon found that the United States was the best place to raise funds, disseminate propaganda, and build up their political organizations.
Coming to the United States gives them a platform that they can use for the rest of the world. They can produce their films, their videos, their publications, they can collect money, and they can use it to support their movement. And
Oliver Buck Revelle was one of the FBI's top counterterrorism agents.
Many acts of terrorism have been carried out in the name of religion, so certainly this extremist element of Islam is not unique. What is unique is the international nature, the connection all the way from North America, Europe, the Middle East, Pakistan, Afghanistan, over into Southeast Asia. It is much more global than any type of terrorist network that we've had to deal with in the past.
From the Al-Kifaq Refugee Center in Brooklyn, Abdullah Azzam and others would go around the country raising money and preaching holy war.
There is no turning back from the stone to the pistol, to the Uzi, to the cannon, to the RPG, and then you can expect Allah's ultimate victory.
The Al-Kifaq Refugee Center set up an elaborate support and recruiting network coast to coast, with branches in more than 38 American cities. These centers became clearinghouses and recruiting offices to support jihad around the world. It was Azzam's top aide, a Palestinian sheikh named Tamim al-Adnani,
who did some of the most vigorous fundraising. He is seen here appealing for funds in Lawrence, Kansas in 1988.
So one of our purposes is to collect money for Mujahideen, donations, as much as we can. And alhamdulillah, today, as our brothers noticed, we have got from Colombia the greatest sum so far. Before Colombia, we had 9,500 from a place called Corvallis, town called Corvallis in Oregon, very near to Portland. Now, today, we have got much more. We have got $15,256 plus about 4,500 gold. So about $20,000 from the town of Colombia. And this is the peak now.
But it wasn't just money he was interested in. Adnani was actively recruiting fighters to take part in the jihad.
The only politics we understand is taq, taq, taq. This is the best politics. Shooting, we sell our, as Sayyaf said, نحن نحل قضيتنا في الخنادق لا في الفنادق. We solve our problems in the trenches, not in the hotels. Our problems are solved in the trenches, fighting, not in the hotels, round the tables.
But Adnani was not just referring to the trenches in Afghanistan. His vision of jihad was a worldwide liberation movement waged in the name of Allah. Listen to him here as he explains to his followers the scope of the holy war.
The best thing is continue jihad, nothing but jihad. Even after liberation of Afghanistan, wallahi, the leaders have agreed in front of me to continue jihad fi sabilillah, even after liberation of Afghanistan. Even after the Islamic government, they will not stop. They will go up to the Muslim countries of Russia, Islamic republics. They will go down to Palestine, to Al-Quds. They all promised Allah to liberate Palestine. Anybody stops in their way, oh my God, I will sit over him myself. Smash him. Any ruler, he will not let us go, we'll go by force. Jihad, you know what is jihad? Allahu Akbar. And then imagine the Afghanis who gave very hard time to Russia, the Soviets. What will they do with the Israelis? They will eat them. Afghanis are very crazy people. They are very brave. I have never seen like this. Wallahi, 100, all of them, Allahu Akbar, and they run. Machine gun, bombs, nothing stop them, wallahi. Nothing. When they want to die shahada, they want shahada. Allahu Akbar, and they come.
But the militants' rage was not limited to their enemies in the Middle East. Increasingly, the Islamic holy warriors focused their anger on the West, especially America. Abdullah Azzam was the keynote speaker at what was called the First Conference of Jihad, held not in the Middle East, but in Brooklyn, New York. Azzam instructed his audience to wage jihad wherever they were, even in America.
The jihad, the fighting, is obligatory on you wherever you can perform it. And just as when you are in America you must fast unless you are ill or on a voyage, so too must you wage jihad. The word jihad means fighting only, fighting with the sword.
In 1989, Azzam was assassinated in Pakistan by unknown assailants. His death made him a martyr to radical Muslims around the world. Back in America, the calls for jihad grew even louder from leaders like Azzam's cousin Fayez, speaking in Atlanta in 1990.
Allah's religion, be He praised, must offer scouts, must offer martyrs. Blood must flow. There must be widows. There must be orphans. Hands and limbs must be cut, and the limbs and blood must be spread everywhere in order that Allah's religion stand on its feet.
Groups of militants began weapons training on American soil. Islamic radicals, including several suspects in the World Trade Center bombing, attended this meeting in Brooklyn, where Sheikh Tamim al-Adnani ordered them to prepare for the holy war.
Brothers, I encourage you to attend the shooting practice. There is nothing greater than the power of the shot. Learn to shoot. The skill of shooting is so important. He who has begun learning how to shoot and did not go through with the training is not one of us. And from here we move on to the true shooting against the enemies of Allah, God willing.
followers answered the call. Radicals conducted military exercises at shooting ranges and training camps in at least 9 U.S. locations, including this one in Connecticut. Groups of Islamic militants fired semi-automatic weapons and trained with explosives. According to FBI intelligence reports, groups would come every weekend and shoot 1,000 rounds a day into silhouette-shaped targets. One of the leaders was an Egyptian immigrant named Said Nosser. In November 1990, Nosser was arrested for the murder of militant Rabbi Meir Kahane.
Watch the walls. Thank you. It hurts.
Nosser was shot while fleeing the murder scene. He was brought to the same emergency room as Kahane. Nosser survived his wound and was later sent to Attica prison. Rabbi Kahane died on this table. Alvin Schlesinger was the judge at the trial.
I had never in my life, I must tell you, ever seen such raw, red hatred that existed between any groups or any persons. I mean, it was the kind of hatred that went far beyond doctrine, far beyond the cause. It was raw, red, and violent hatred.
We have murder in the second degree, second charge of attempted murder, first degree. Third charge is assault, second degree. Fourth charge is criminal possession of a weapon.
Even though Nosser had ties to an international radical network, police never investigated the possibility of a larger conspiracy.
There is no indication at all of any conspiracy of a nature that has been spoken of. The facts indicate at this point it was a lone gunman who committed a homicide.
Nosser was ultimately convicted of weapons charges, but unexpectedly, the jury acquitted him of the Kahane murder. His supporters were elated.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
It was irrational almost in terms of the evidence that I saw at that trial. It made no sense, common or otherwise, to reach that verdict, particularly with the other verdicts that were reached. So I think it was outrageous.
Nosser was brought to this holding cell in Lower Manhattan after his arrest. By then, detectives had searched his apartment and found 47 boxes full of personal possessions and papers. But investigators dismissed those papers as irrelevant religious materials. It was only after the bombing of the World Trade Center that law enforcement re-examined those papers and realized they had overlooked one of the largest collections of terrorist materials ever found in the United States. The papers included plans to blow up American skyscrapers. The documents would reveal that Nosser was at the heart of a worldwide terrorist network headquartered right here in the United States.
Unfortunately, we had that information. It was there, and we didn't see it.
Michael Cherkasky was the chief of investigations for the Manhattan District Attorney at the time of the bombing.
And looking back at it, there was enormous amounts of significant material in those boxes. Whether they were the precise plans, no, I don't think so, but were there very strong indications that this man and a group of compatriots were involved in terrorist activities which could ultimately lead to a disaster like the World Trade Center? The answer is yes.
The boxes included formulas for bomb making, detailed instructions on attacking aircraft, assassination targets, and even classified U.S. military documents. Yet by far, the most important document was a hand-sized spiral notebook full of neatly written Arabic text in which Nosser spells out his plans for the destruction of the enemies of Allah.
We have to thoroughly demoralize the enemies of God by means of destroying and blowing up the towers that constitute the pillars of their civilization, such as the tourist attractions they are so proud of and the high buildings they are so proud of.
Only when we started looking at that material and we started finding things and seeing things clearly for the first time, that we became agitated honestly, because we hadn't seen it before, and excited because, in fact, we now thought we had more of a clue about tracing the history of this group and more of an idea about what had actually happened here. That, in fact, it was a long-term conspiracy that had been hatched by Sheikh Rahman.
Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman, leader of a militant Egyptian movement, came to the United States in 1990. He would soon assert control over the Jihad movement in the U.S. The killing of Kahana was the first act of terrorism planned and carried out by Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman's foot soldiers.
Omar Abdul Rahman was accused in Egypt of enticing people to kill Sadat. He got away with it. He came here. I heard him myself talking about jihad, and I heard him, and I understand how he could convince people in the way of jihad, in the wrong meaning of the word jihad. See, the only thing is that we don't have any picture for him.
Saif Ashmawi publishes an Arabic newspaper called The Voice of Peace. Despite threats to his life, he has been a vocal critic of Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman.
Islam is a very new baby in United States. It just been introduced to the American in the past 10 years. They heard of it, but they don't know anything about it. In the past 10 years, they start to listen to it. And all the image they had at that time was Imam Khomeini. Now they have worse than Imam Khomeini after the World Trade Center.
Sheikh Abdul Rahman actively recruited followers across the country.
The obligation of Allah is upon us to wage jihad for the sake of Allah. It is one of the obligations which we must undoubtedly fulfill. And we conquer the lands of the infidels, and we spread Islam by calling the infidels to Allah. And if they stand in our way, then we wage jihad for the sake of Allah.
The jihad movement in the United States attracted a group of followers willing to put words into action. Like Mahmoud and Mohammed Abu Halima, identified here for the first time at this jihad rally in Brooklyn in 1989 and charged 4 years later as conspirators in the World Trade Center bombing. And Sadiq Ali, a Sudanese radical accused of being an architect of Sheikh Abdul Rahman's campaign of terror. Here, just months before the World Trade Center bombing, he is recruiting followers in New Jersey.
When the sword is to be absolutely used and implemented, this is as a principle.
Jihad is something that has to be implemented. It's not a thing that we speak of, it's a thing that we do.
And Clement Rodney Hampdonell, an American who was wounded in Afghanistan fighting the jihad. Hampdonell was a follower of Sheikh Abdul Rahman and allegedly helped plan the killing of Rabbi Meir Kahana. He would later be charged in the World Trade Center conspiracy.
Jihad, Allahu Akbar, Jihad, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
From his prison cell, Nasser continued to organize the campaign of terror. Prison logs show that he met with several of the conspirators to help plan the World Trade Center bombing.
He was a soldier when he shot Kahani, and in some ways his status was elevated to be a soldier, a trainer, an example, a martyr for the movement, who was allegedly continually demanding that the movement move forward, that they take more strident action, that he was sitting in jail for what he had done, and that others had to pick up the mantle.
But the plot did not shift into high gear until the arrival of two men in the United States 5 months before the bombing. One was Ahmed Hajjaj. He was arrested at Kennedy Airport for carrying false passports. Police found in his possession a vast array of bomb-making manuals and videotapes, including this one, produced by a group called the International Islamic Resistance. Hajjaj's partner, Ramzi Youssef, managed to enter the country. He immediately went to a New Jersey safe house where he began building the bomb. He spoke regularly to a judge in prison. Yusuf escaped hours after the blast. His whereabouts today are unknown. In the summer of 1993, Sheikh Abdul Rahman and 14 followers were indicted for the bombing of the World Trade Center. They were also accused of conspiring to blow up the Lincoln and Holland tunnels and the United Nations building and planning the assassination of prominent Americans. In April 1994, in the first of a series of trials, 4 followers of Sheikh Rahman's, Mohammed Salama, Mahmoud Abu Halima, Niyal Ayad, and Ahmed Ajaj, were sentenced to 240 years each. But Sheikh Abdul Rahman's followers are not alone. Our investigation has revealed that they are just one of several radical groups who have set up networks throughout the United States to support international terrorism. These networks include 2 of the most notorious terrorist organizations in the world, Hezbollah and Hamas.
The Hezbollah and the Hamas are very active in the United States. We now know that they have carried out military training operations, including firearms practice, the creation and construction of explosive device and bombs. We know that they are taking munitions and materials into areas of the world where they are carrying out assassinations and acts of terrorism. And they are also putting together arsenals within the United States for the same purposes.
U.S. law enforcement officials say Brooklyn's Al-Kifa Refugee Center has in the past supported Hamas and other international terrorist groups. It is now headed by Sheikh Abdul Walid Zindani. In addition to raising funds for humanitarian purposes, members of the Al-Kifa organization are believed to have been involved in bombings and assassinations around the world. Zindani refused to speak to us and denied any involvement with radical Islamic politics. But this speech at a mosque in Brooklyn reveals Zindani as a leading Islamic holy warrior.
Allah, the Most High and Exalted, ordered us to kill the idol worshippers, the enemies of Allah. Fight the idol worshippers all together, just as they fight all of you. When you go into battle, fight the idol worshippers wherever you find them. Pursue them and finish them off.
Richardson, Texas is a sprawling suburb of Dallas. Located here in a nondescript industrial park is the headquarters of Hamas's principal American support group. IAP stands for the Islamic Association for Palestine. The IAP publishes Hamas books, magazines, and pamphlets, and has dozens of offices and affiliates around the country.
The general aim is to inform the public about the Palestinian issue.
Mohammed Al-Hassan is the editor of the Muslim World Monitor published by the IAP. He denies any connection to Hamas. Do you support the Hamas covenant? Do you support the Hamas point of view?
I don't support any point of view as such.
Does the Muslim World Monitor support the point of view?
I want to say it does, no.
Does the IAP support the Hamas point of view?
Not as the Hamas point of view, no. It supports liberation of Palestine. It supports informing the public about the Palestinian issue. It supports informing the public about the different groups, the different activities which are going on in Palestine. But it doesn't take a position in support of any one group per se.
Yet IAP released this Hamas communique that urges Muslims to die in the holy war against Jews, who they call enemies of humanity, the bloodsuckers, and the killers of prophets. IAP routinely publishes anti-Jewish literature, such as this pamphlet, which it has distributed for years. We got a copy at an Islamic conference in August 1994. There was a publication put out by IAP that I got a hold of. It says America's greatest enemy, the Jew.
Well, I've never seen that publication myself. I don't know how many years ago it was put out, or I would have to read it before I could comment on it.
Under the name Oxyvision, the IAP produces informational videos on a variety of subjects. I have heard that there is a tape distributed by Oxyvision that glorifies jihad and the killing of the infidel or the occupier.
I mean, I would have to ask. I don't know about that myself, personally.
You don't know of any types of films that are distributed out of the offices?
I don't know exactly.
IAP's Oxyvision produced this Hamas video, which takes credit for executions, torture, and terrorist operations in Palestine. Our investigation has uncovered more than 30 groups that fund radical Islamic activities and operate under tax-exempt status.
They're engaged in many instances in illegal actions, not collecting money for purposes of simply supporting humanitarian aspects, but for munitions and weapons and military capabilities. And in addition, if you listen to what they're really saying, they're not just aimed at the Israelis. They're not just aimed at the Jewish state. Their goals are completely and totally to eradicate any opposition to Hamas and to Islam and to move against the United States ultimately.
They probably have set up an organization that allegedly only does fundraising. And they probably tell people who give money that the fundraising is only going to nice, soft things like hospitals and childcare. But in fact, money raised in this way is fungible. It can be used to buy AK-47s or bomb makings.
In 1989, some of the world's most influential leaders of radical Islam held a conference attended by Sheikh Mohammed Siam, a leader of Hamas from Palestine; Abdullah Anas, a leader of the Algerian Islamic Front; Rashid Ghannouchi, head of the radical Tunisian fundamentalist group called Al-Nada; Tawfiq Mustafa, a leader of the Muslim Liberation Party based in Jordan; Yusuf al-Qaradawi, a militant Muslim leader originally from Egypt. This conference was never intended to be broadcast. It was a secret gathering to expand jihad networks and terrorist operations. Actual Hamas terrorists, veiled to protect their identities, boasted of their successful executions.
16 Jewish soldiers were killed.
But this gathering did not take place in the Middle East. It happened in the heartland of America, Kansas City, Missouri. All of these groups have established bases in the United States and have many graduates. Like Mohammed Salah, a Palestinian American who was arrested in Israel in early 1993 for financing the purchase of weapons that were used to murder 4 people. He had attended secret workshops on terrorist warfare at another conference held in the Midwest in 1990. In other parts of the United States, FBI officials have confirmed the existence of several command centers and communication posts, like this Texas hamburger stand, which relayed telephone calls between the World Trade Center bombers as a means of avoiding detection. This letter was sent to a Hamas command center operating out of a Chicago grocery store. It is a request for money and further instructions from their American-based military commanders.
We request that you give us orders telling the conditions under which it is permissible to kill a collaborator or torture a collaborator to force him to confess.
Freedom of religion and freedom of speech are 2 of our most precious liberties in the United States. And it's exactly within that fold, within that protection, that these groups can function. So it poses a real threat to us that they can come to full-blown fruition before we really know the scope and the intensity of their involvement and their potential for violence within the United States. I think that's the biggest threat, is that it may well be that we don't know the extent of their capabilities and their intentions until we actually see them in action.
We have documented at least a dozen similar conferences that have taken place in America in the past 5 years, where militant leaders from around the world have praised acts of terrorism and urged their followers to wage jihad.
If you take the case of the kinds of speeches that Sheikh Rahman was giving before the attack in the World Trade Center, It's sort of the equivalent of yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. You can't say that the freedom of speech extends to shouting fire in a crowded movie theater. Words have consequences, and when you go every Friday to the mosque and give this kind of a stem-winding, blood-curdling speech, at some point you have to be responsible for those consequences.
We ought to listen to what they say and what they intend to do.
On the hour of judgment, Muslims will fight the Jews and kill them.
It's their own words, their own actions, and their own deeds that are the key to our understanding of their intentions.
We want this small Muslim community to serve as a dagger in the center of the civilization.
And their intentions are to harm the United States in very significant ways and to reduce its ability to oppose their international agenda.
Open the borders of Jordan to the Muslim youth so they may confront the Jews and the Americans at once.
That's what we need to be concerned about, what they themselves intend to do.
Hamas supporters are celebrating the return of their leaders to the West Bank and Gaza. This could be a scene from the Middle East, but in fact, this rally was held in New Jersey in November 1993 and was organized by the IAP. The singers are saying we solve our problems with the Kalashnikov, a Russian semi-automatic rifle. Some even brought their own guns. The rejoicing continues with lyrics like, "We buy paradise with the blood of the Jews." Literature preaching hatred and intolerance is increasingly found in Islamic bookstores throughout the United States, titles that demonize Judaism and attack Christianity. A culture of violence has begun to spread to the next generation in the United States. These American Muslim children are attending a summer retreat in the Midwest. But this is not your typical summer camp. Here, the children are taught to praise armed struggle and terrorism. In this jihad chant, they are praising the leader of Hamas. This young camper just said, "Butcher the Jews." It's a Friday afternoon in Washington, D.C. Devout Muslims are coming for prayer services. Across the street, Sheikh Mohammed Al-Asi leads a demonstration against the leaders of this mosque.
In the past 11 years, we've been coming here and we cannot go into the masjid. Is this freedom? Is this what is included in the Bill of Rights?
Sheikh Al-Asi is the religious leader of the Islamic Education Center in Potomac, Maryland.
I would say that the Jews have disproportionate control over the instruments of government. I would say Capitol Hill is Zionist-occupied territory. I would say the executive building, the White House, is also under a cloud of a Zionist umbrella, and so can be said about the State Department, the Pentagon, etc.
He routinely calls for the destruction of Israel, Egypt, and any regime allied with the United States.
We're not picking on the United States. We're not picking on anyone. We're just dealing with the people who are coming and causing us all these problems. Why is the United States placing itself in the middle of all of these problems? If it extricates itself from all of this, it will not force us to do what we are forced to do. But if it stirs a hornet's nest, the hornets are not going to respond in a lackadaisical manner.
Do you believe then in the use of violence, even as a last resort?
Yes, I believe in the use of violence. Well, wait a minute. Don't take this issue or put words in the mouth of the interlocutor. Violence is not the word. The use of arms, I think, would be the word, the more accurate word to use here. And the Quran teaches us that sometimes the use of arms is inevitable. In order for justice to be done, this is the only recourse we have.
What about Egyptian leaders like Mubarak or Israeli leaders who come to the United States?
Right.
Since they are running their government's policies, are they legitimate targets?
No, unless the United States becomes a war front, they're not legitimate targets.
Unless the U.S. becomes a war front?
Unless the United States becomes a war front.
And at what time would it become a war front?
When do places become war fronts? When you have a war.
Is there emerging a war front condition at this point?
No, I don't think there's a war front here in the United States at this point. I think if the whole scenario continues the way it has, inevitably the United States is going to be reaching a type of war front. Yeah, but not right now.
How much longer do we have?
That's very hard to predict. I mean, if I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be somewhere else.
Sheikh Al-Asi is a frequent speaker at radical Muslim conferences. He made this speech in Chicago during the build-up for the Persian Gulf War.
If the Americans are placing their forces in the Persian Gulf, we should be creating another war front for the Americans in the Muslim world, and specifically where American interests are concentrated, in Egypt, in Turkey, in the Indian subcontinent, just to mention a few. Strike against American interests there.
That conference was sponsored by the Islamic Committee for Palestine. The committee describes itself as a charitable organization. The group it supports, the Islamic Jihad, has been responsible for some of the bloodiest terrorist acts of the past 10 years, including the mutilation of 3 Israeli factory workers and a stabbing attack on a Tel Aviv street that killed 1 school child and seriously wounded several others. It seems a long way from global acts of terrorism to this suburban shopping mall, but it's not. The Islamic Committee for Palestine is based here in Tampa, Florida. This used to be its headquarters, but in 1994, the committee vacated this office and moved to an undisclosed address here in Tampa. Peace Be Upon You is a cable access show in Tampa that reaches 60,000 homes. Its host is a professor of engineering at the University of South Florida. He is also the president of the Islamic Committee for Palestine.
It does not try to abolish other ideologies and other religions. I have my religion, and you have yours.
Sami Al-Arian's organization, according to law enforcement, serves as the primary support group in the United States for Islamic Jihad. ICP promotes Islamic Jihad in both the U.S. and the Middle East.
Palestine Islamic Jihad is a terrorist organization. It's a group of radical fundamentalist Palestinians which came together in the 1970s with the objective of basically establishing a fundamentalist state on the terrain of Israel, destroying Israel. That's their objective, and they've engaged in terrorism against Israelis, both civilians and military, and against moderate Arabs and other Palestinians who disagree with them.
Sami Al-Arian denies any connection between the Islamic Committee for Palestine and Islamic Jihad.
You know, we're not really a political organization. We're more of, a charitable, social, cultural type of group. We're trying to really stress the existence of the Palestinian community here in the West and trying to educate them about, especially in cultural terms, because I've seen a lot of tragedies about their children. And that's where basically we're trying to focus our efforts right now.
Would you say that you support the Islamic Jihad factions?
No, we don't support any political groups at all.
Yet the Islamic Jihad's newspaper, Islam in Palestine, listed the ICP Tampa address as one of its main offices.
There was never affiliation. I mean, I'm not sure that Islam in Palestine was, to start with, a jihad. I saw most of the issues. I never saw the word jihad on it.
In fact, many of the issues openly promote holy war against the West. Dr. Al-Arian himself wrote this speech published by the ICP urging jihad. It says, "We assemble today to pay respects to the March of the Martyrs and to the river of blood that gushes forth and does not extinguish, from butchery to butchery and from martyrdom to martyrdom, from jihad to jihad." The Islamic Committee for Palestine has also sponsored conferences featuring some of the most radical Islamic leaders in the world today, including Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman.
I reject the terms, fundamentalists, radicals, all that.
Sheikh Omar?
He is more of a conservative. Again, he dropped in, he was never invited. But you wouldn't find his name, and when he dropped in, he was given a lecture, believe it or not, to the youth and children. He was not given a forum to the adults.
Another radical leader who has been consistently invited to ICP conferences is Sheikh Abdulaziz Odeh, the spiritual leader of Islamic Jihad. But Abdulaziz Odeh has been here.
Well, he's been to the conferences.
But he's been to this mosque, yes? No?
Was he? He might have been. I need to check my records. He might have been. Actually, many people have been to this mosque.
Sheikh Abdulaziz Odeh has in fact visited Al-Arian's mosque in Tampa and frequently travels in and out of the United States. U.S. authorities say Odeh was an active member of Sheikh Abdul Rahman's group in Brooklyn. He was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the World Trade Center bombing. At an ICP conference in Chicago, Sheikh Odeh delivered this speech.
Now Allah is bringing the Jews back to Palestine in large groups from all over the world to their big graveyard, where the promise will be realized upon them and what was destined will be carried out.
If someone were to say that Israel is to serve as the mass graveyard of all the Jews, what would your reaction be to that?
Yeah, some people may say that. Yeah, I've read it. I know some people may have said it.
Would you be surprised if you found out that Sheikh Abdulaziz Odeh of the Islamic Jihad came to the United States quite frequently for the past 6 years?
I would be very surprised. I think it would indicate another time how lax our immigration procedures are dealing with terrorists. It's shocking because what it means in effect is it's easier to come to the United States as a terrorist than as a refugee.
One way they get in is through groups like ICPI, the Islamic Charity Project International. ICPI claims to be a humanitarian relief organization. Wipe a tear, it says in its brochure, make an orphan smile. Law enforcement officials say ICPI money goes to jihad activities. And as a non-profit religious organization, it poses as a front to bring radical extremists into the United States. This footage of a 1992 ICPI conference held in the United States shows the organization's darker side.
All those operations that comfort our hearts, all of them were perpetrated by Muslims. Isn't it so? The operation of the bus. Aren't you following history? Who is behind it? The killing of Kahane. Who is behind it? These lessons speak for themselves.
Sheikh Akb bin Nofal is a known recruiter of Hamas terrorists in Jordan. One of the operations he was applauding is this terrorist act in Israel. An Islamic fundamentalist commandeered a bus and drove it off a cliff. 16 people, including one American, were killed. One of ICPI's most prominent members is Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman, seen here sitting next to Sheikh Nofal at another ICPI conference.
Sheikh Rahman is the leader, is the organizer, has the impetus that pushes forward these group of individuals, these foot soldiers, to strike at America as the great Satan, and try to damage America and unnerve America and sap the will of America by terrorist acts.
Some radical groups here say their only enemies are Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and they are not enemies of the United States.
If you listen to what they're saying, Israel, Egypt, Jordan are surrogates for the United States, that they are puppets and we're the puppeteer. And the way to strike at Israel, Egypt, and so forth is at the United States, because without the United States, they could not and would not exist. So we are the ultimate. We are the great Satan that is their primary and ultimate target.
As the activities of Muslim radicals expand in the United States, future attacks seem inevitable. Combating these groups within the boundaries of the Constitution will be the greatest challenge to law enforcement since the war on organized crime.
I think because we have this guaranteed free speech, guaranteed free religion, that their statements have gone largely unnoticed. We, in the United States, the law enforcement communities cannot collect public information unless they have an ongoing criminal investigation. So those things that you as a journalist or other journalists may know or academicians may know, law enforcement will not necessarily and probably will not know.
Most Americans cannot grasp the militant Islamic threat, but moderate Muslims must live with it every day. Adil Yusuf is a Sudanese Muslim who knows several of the defendants in the conspiracy and rejects their interpretation of Islam.
They believe all the Westerns are the enemy of Islam. All the Christians and Jewish group, they are the enemy of Islam. And they believe even there are some Islamic group working with those Western people, they are enemy of Islam. And they said those are even dangerous than the Western themselves.
Those people have their own doctrine. They could accuse you that you are infidel. They could accuse you that you are not a Muslim. By saying that, which is the word kafir or infidel, by saying that, you are being put out of the community. In other words, your blood became lawful. Anyone could kill you, and anyone, if he does so he did it in the way of God.
Saif Ashmawi knows many of the militants and says that democracy means something entirely different to them.
Hitler came to power in a democratic means. Mussolini came to power in democratic means. Those people are using the democracy just to reach the power. Once they have the power, there will be no democracy. I heard it over and over and over. For many of them, I read their publication. They are saying there is no democracy in Islam.
The very freedoms that allow them to function and operate are what they despise. And it is a paradox that we have not come to grips with. And we can't understand as a nation why people that we allow to come in and benefit from our system and our protections turn around and in essence hate us for it.
Last summer, the world saw what could have happened in the World Trade Center blast. Using an almost identical bomb, suspected Islamic terrorists blew up the Jewish Cultural Center in Buenos Aires, Argentina. More than 100 civilians were killed. The terror of Islamic militants is no longer a problem confined to the Middle East. While some militant organizations may portray themselves as moderates, it is in fact moderate Muslims who are most threatened. The militants' agenda demands confrontation with any group that disagrees with their radical vision. Although the militants may claim to speak on behalf of all Muslims, Islam as a religion does not condone violence. The radicals represent only themselves, an extremist and violent fringe.
Now you know the origin of the horror that was inflicted upon us on September 11, 2001. You know that the attacks were not hatched overnight by a handful of maniacs, but the ultimate result of years of careful planning and relentless effort by groups of fanatics dedicated to the destruction of everything we hold dear. Now you know. Now we will move forward together, united, come what may. Jihad in America Part 2, Osama bin Laden and the War to Destroy America, will jump forward several years into the 21st century, taking off where Jihad in America ended. We will journey from Pakistan into Afghanistan and meet with those few Afghan forces fighting year after year against the Taliban and Osama bin Laden. We will travel deep into the rugged mountains of this battle-scarred country and confront captured Taliban soldiers and bin Laden terrorists. We will show how Osama bin Laden has used his immense personal fortune to build a network of killers and fighters. We will chart the growth of terrorist cells and support groups in the US and around the world, delving deep into the determined evil that is international terrorism. We will take you up close and personal with those who labor every day, both secretly and openly, in their war to destroy America and the free world.
درع الإخوان ضد الخوان من زحفوا ذلا للأمريكان شامر لا تغضب شامر لا تغضب نحن سيان